Children of this century grow up in a world that no longer resembles the world their parents knew, and perhaps that is where the distance begins, a quiet distance that turns into misunderstanding and misunderstanding that turns into disobedience. Parents remember a time when the home was the center of life, when a single look from a mother could correct behavior, when a father's advice was not a suggestion but a guiding star. Children today, however, are born into a century of noise, speed, competition, distraction, and relentless pressure. And somehow the simple emotional bridge between parents and children has become crowded with the weight of a new world. The truth is that children of this century do not disobey because they love their parents less. They disobey because their world pulls them in 100 different directions while their parents' voices sound far away beneath the layers of technology, expectations, social comparison, and constant stimulation. A child in the past found comfort, mentorship, discipline, and identity mostly within the family. But a child today finds these things in screens, apps, influencers, online communities, and virtual spaces that often become louder than the home. The world outside the home used to be slower, gentler, and limited. Now the world sits in their hands 24 hours a day, feeding them new values, new attitudes, and new ideas, some helpful, some harmful, but all influential. Why then do children not obey as they once did? Perhaps because they are growing up in a landscape where obedience itself feels outdated, where independence is praised more than discipline, where questioning is encouraged more than listening, and where speed matters more than reflection. Parents feel confused because what they offer, love, wisdom, caution, boundaries, seems ignored, while what the world offers, entertainment, excitement, instant gratification, seems irresistible. The battle is uneven. The home moves slowly, but the modern world moves at lightning speed. And in this difference of speed lies one of the greatest emotional gaps between generations. Children of this century grow up surrounded by stressful environments. School competition, pressure to succeed, unrealistic beauty standards, online comparisons, and the fear of not being good enough. At the same time, parents remember a world where life was simpler, where happiness was not measured by likes and comments, where failure was a lesson and not a shame. When parents demand obedience, children often interpret it as restriction, not protection. When parents try to guide, children feel misunderstood. When parents worry, children feel controlled. And slowly a wall rises between intention and perception. The parent wants to protect. The child wants to be free. The parent thinks discipline builds character. The child thinks discipline kills freedom. Two hearts loving each other deeply, yet standing on opposite sides of understanding. Sometimes children misbehave not because they are rebellious, but because they are overwhelmed. The modern child carries mental burdens that previous generations never imagined. Anxiety from exams, pressure from social media, confusion from millions of online opinions, and the fear of being left behind. When a child is mentally exhausted, emotionally stressed, or sleep-deprived due to screens and constant stimulation, they naturally become irritable, resistant, and uncooperative. A child who does not obey is often a child who is silently struggling, sometimes even crying inside without knowing how to express it. Parents, too, face pressures of their own. They work longer hours, battle financial stress, and struggle to balance life responsibilities. They return home tired, drained, and emotionally stretched. In this state, they expect immediate obedience, thinking it will make life easier. But children, overwhelmed in their own world, do not respond with the obedience parents hope for. Instead of connecting, conflict arises. Instead of communication, arguments follow. Instead of understanding, both sides feel hurt. Another reason children today do not obey as easily is that many parents unknowingly shifted from authority to friendship, thinking it would bring closeness, but children need boundaries as much as they need affection. They need guidance more than companionship, structure more than indulgence, and consequences more than repeated warnings. When rules are inconsistent, children learn to negotiate. When discipline is delayed, they learn to ignore. When parents fear upsetting their children, children learn to challenge instead of cooperate. Love without boundaries creates confusion. Boundaries without love create fear. The balance is delicate, yet essential. Moreover, the value system of this century is different. Respect was once taught, expected, and reinforced through daily life. Now it must compete with a culture that celebrates individualism to the point of ego. Children are encouraged to express themselves, but sometimes expression turns into impulsiveness. They are told to follow their dreams, but sometimes dreams overshadow responsibilities. They are encouraged to be unique, but sometimes uniqueness is mistaken for rejecting guidance. When children absorb these messages without balance, obedience becomes something they resist because they associate it with losing independence. The rise of digital influence is one of the greatest factors. A child who spends hours watching influencers may begin to value the voices of strangers more than the voices of parents. Online role models often project lifestyles of rebellion, confidence without humility, freedom without responsibility, entertainment without respect. Children absorb these unconscious lessons. They imitate attitudes, language, and behavior they see online. A single short video can undo years of parental teaching if the child watches it repeatedly and emotionally connects to it. Parents feel they are now raising children alongside a powerful, invisible competitor, the internet. Technology also shortens attention spans. A child used to instant results becomes impatient with slow explanations. A child who scrolls through 200 videos a day finds it difficult to listen to a 5-minute instruction from a parent. A child used to virtual praise finds real-world correction uncomfortable. When patience disappears, obedience becomes difficult. When focus fades, communication weakens. When conversation becomes boring compared to screens, family bonds suffer. Social comparison is another hidden reason. Children see peers with more freedom, more gadgets, more privileges. They begin to question their parents' decisions. Why can't I stay out late when others can? Why can't I buy this phone if my friend has it? Why do you restrict me when other parents don't? These comparisons create resentment. Instead of trusting their parents' wisdom, children begin to perceive their boundaries as unfair. It becomes emotionally easier for a child to challenge a parent than to accept feeling deprived in front of peers. The erosion of family time also plays a role. When families no longer eat meals together, talk regularly, or spend quality time without screens, emotional bonding weakens. A child who does not feel connected is less likely to obey. Obedience is not just about rules. It is about relationship. In the past, families lived, worked, and shared life closely, creating a natural culture of respect and unity. Today, physical closeness has been replaced by digital distraction, and emotional closeness weakens silently. When bonding decreases, obedience becomes negotiable. Parents must also reflect on their own behavior. Children learn not from lectures, but from observation. When parents are impatient, children become impatient. When parents shout, children learn disrespect. When parents argue harshly, children learn rebellion. When parents break promises, children lose trust. A child's disobedience often mirrors the emotional environment they grow up in. Respect can only be expected when respect is modeled. A peaceful home produces cooperative children. A tense home produces defensive ones. Yet despite all this, there is hope. Children today are not lost. They are simply navigating a more complicated world. They still crave love, stability, guidance, and approval. They still want to be understood. Deep down, they still value their parents more than anyone else, even if their behavior sometimes hides it. What they need is not harsher discipline or endless lectures. They need connection, calm communication, emotional safety, and consistent boundaries. They need parents who listen before correcting, who explain before enforcing, who guide with firmness but love with softness. If parents want obedience, they must first rebuild trust. If they want respect, they must first show empathy. If they want cooperation, they must create emotional closeness. A child who feels understood obeys more than a child who feels controlled. A child who feels valued listens more than a child who feels criticized. A child who feels safe communicates more than a child who feels judged. And in this century of noise, distractions, and endless influences, the greatest gift a parent can give is not control, it is presence. Real presence. Uninterrupted, calm, loving, and attentive presence. When children feel emotionally anchored at home, the outside world cannot pull them away. Children of this century are also growing up in a time when questioning authority is encouraged. Schools no longer expect blind obedience. They teach children to express their thoughts, challenge ideas, and form their own opinions. While this is healthy for creativity and critical thinking, it often creates a clash at home, where parents still expect the traditional pattern of respect without debate. Children who grow up questioning teachers, systems, and rules naturally extend that questioning to parents, not out of arrogance, but out of habit. They believe dialogue is normal, and when parents mistake this for disrespect, conflicts arise. Children nowadays do not see obedience as a sign of respect. They see mutual understanding as respect. This shift in perception is one of the most misunderstood changes between generations. Another dimension is emotional awareness. Modern children have more vocabulary to express feelings. They learn words like anxiety, depression, stress, overwhelm, burnout, insecurity, and fear at very young ages. But just because they know the words doesn't mean they know how to manage the emotions. They feel deeply but lack coping skills. When overwhelmed emotions are not understood at home, children express them through defiance, silence, mood swings, or stubbornness. Obedience becomes difficult when emotions are heavy, and modern childhood is emotionally heavy. Children today carry emotional weight that previous generations may never have recognized or acknowledged. A child may refuse to obey not because the instruction is wrong, but because they feel unseen, unheard, or emotionally invisible. Parents sometimes misinterpret emotional expression as misbehavior. A child crying is seen as dramatic. A child asking for space is seen as disrespectful. A child saying, "I don't feel good," is seen as lazy. A child challenging a rule is seen as rebellious. And slowly the child begins to disconnect emotionally, thinking the parent does not understand them. When emotional connection breaks, obedience follows. Children obey those they feel connected to. When connection weakens, cooperation becomes fragile. Economic pressure has also transformed parenting styles. In earlier generations, one parent often stayed at home, giving children emotional stability and consistent guidance. Today, both parents often work out of necessity. While they provide financial security, they unintentionally provide less emotional availability. A child returning from school with bottled-up stress finds no one to share it with. A child struggling with a bully, a difficult teacher, or academic pressure may have no space to unload these worries. When the emotional bottle fills up, the overflow appears as disobedience, irritation, and withdrawal at home. Parents interpret it as attitude. Children experience it as emotional suffocation. And then there is the issue of unrealistic expectations. Modern children are expected to excel academically, socially, emotionally, and technologically. They must get good grades, have good manners, be confident, be social, manage their emotions, avoid mistakes, stay disciplined, and maintain the perfect behavior parents want. But children are children. They make mistakes, forget things, slip into laziness, get distracted, or feel frustrated. When parents react harshly to small failures, children begin to resist. Obedience becomes a burden. Instructions feel like pressure rather than guidance. Parents believe they are shaping their children's future. Children feel as if they are constantly disappointing their parents. This emotional misalignment leads to resistance disguised as disobedience. The rise of peer influence also affects obedience. The modern classroom is not just a place of learning, it is a social battlefield where children try to fit in, avoid embarrassment, maintain status, and navigate friendships. When a parent instructs a child in a way that conflicts with peer culture, the child chooses peers over parents because the consequences at school feel more immediate and emotionally impactful. Children fear losing friendships more than parental approval. In earlier times, community was small, opinions were limited, and family was the core. Now children belong to multiple social circles, classmates, online friends, gaming groups, social apps, and digital communities. Each group influences their attitude, behavior, and sense of identity. When parents attempt to impose discipline that contradicts these influences, obedience becomes complicated. Another reason modern children often resist parental instructions is because they have more emotional independence but less emotional maturity. They are encouraged to act grown-up early, dressing older, talking older, using technology adults use, consuming media designed for older audiences. This creates an illusion of maturity. Children begin believing they understand life, consequences, and decisions. When parents guide them, they interpret it as interference. But emotional intelligence cannot grow at the pace of technology. Their minds feel older, but their hearts remain young and sensitive. This mismatch leads to defiance. Children appear confident yet are deeply confused. They appear bold yet are silently insecure. They appear independent yet crave affection. Disobedience becomes a mask hiding emotional vulnerability. Social media also teaches children to value instant gratification. They are accustomed to getting entertainment immediately, answers immediately, responses immediately. Obedience often requires patience, delayed gratification, or long-term thinking. But a child trained by fast content finds slow growth difficult. Parents asking a child to study, wait, reflect, or remain disciplined feels like torture compared to the non-stop stimulation of digital life. The child does not intentionally disobey, they simply do not have the patience muscle that previous generations developed through slower lifestyles. Another subtle reason is that parents today often lack emotional connection with their own childhood. They forget how it felt to be confused, to be curious, to be embarrassed, to want independence, or to feel misunderstood. When parents lose touch with their own younger self, they cannot understand their children's behavior from a place of empathy. Instead of remembering their own struggles at age 10 or 15, they judge their children by adult expectations. Children sense this emotional distance and react with resistance. And while parents feel children don't obey, children feel parents don't listen. Both sides want to be heard. Both sides want respect. Both sides want understanding. But neither knows how to bridge the emotional gap. Children think parents are too strict. Parents think children are too stubborn. But beneath the surface, both sides are longing for the same thing: connection. The world has also made parenting more anxious. Parents fear dangers that did not exist before: online predators, cyberbullying, violent content, addictions to screens, exposure to harmful ideas, physical safety concerns, and mental health risks. Their fear translates into overprotection. But overprotection often feels suffocating to children. They interpret fear as control. The more parents tighten their grip, the more children pull away. Obedience declines not because children dislike their parents, but because they want room to breathe, explore, make mistakes, and grow. At the same time, children are exposed to content that glorifies rebellion, sarcasm, independence without responsibility, and disrespect as humor. Many sitcoms, movies, and online videos portray parents as clueless, outdated, or overly strict. Kids absorb these narratives unconsciously and begin to mimic them in real life. The media normalizes talking back, ignoring instructions, and treating parents casually. What was once considered disrespectful is now considered normal behavior. Parents feel shocked. Children feel normal. And this difference in perception widens the generational gap even more. Yet, despite all these factors, children today are not inherently disobedient. They are simply shaped by a world that constantly pulls, distracts, pressures, and confuses them. Deep inside, every child wishes to be loved, understood, and guided. They want parents who see their struggles, not just their mistakes. They want comfort, not criticism. They want connection, not commands. They want guidance, not guilt. Children obey those who make them feel emotionally safe. When parents build emotional safety, obedience follows naturally, not through fear, but through trust. Parents must realize that obedience cannot be demanded. It must be nurtured. Children listen when they feel heard. They respect when they feel respected. They cooperate when they feel connected. Modern parenting requires patience, emotional intelligence, communication, and consistency. Harshness no longer works. Blind authority no longer works. Silent assumptions no longer work. The world has changed and parenting must evolve with it. And yet love remains the same. Love is still the foundation that can rebuild the bridge between generations. Children may disobey at times, but they still look for their parents in moments of fear, uncertainty, pain, and confusion. They still need guidance more than they admit. They still need kindness more than discipline. They still need encouragement more than criticism. And when parents offer these consistently, obedience returns not as a forced duty, but as a natural response to love. Another reason for the decline in obedience is that communication within families has weakened. In the past, conversations happened naturally during meals, during walks, during evenings when families gathered. Today, those shared moments have diminished. Everyone is busy, everyone is tired, and everyone is distracted. Children spend hours on screens. Parents spend hours working. The home becomes a place where people live together but rarely talk deeply. Without communication, misunderstandings grow. When a parent gives instructions without emotional connection, the child perceives commands instead of care. When a child expresses frustration in small hints and the parent is too busy to notice, the child internalizes the belief that their feelings do not matter. Eventually, obedience becomes harder because emotional closeness is missing. There is also a growing sense of independence among children at younger ages. They are exposed to worldviews, lifestyles, and ideologies far beyond their family's environment. A child at age 12 today knows things that a child at age 18 did not know 20 years ago. This early exposure creates a sense of self-importance and maturity. Children begin to believe they know enough to make decisions without parental guidance. However, their emotional development still lags behind their intellectual exposure. This imbalance creates friction. Children feel confident, but parents see their immaturity. When parents intervene, children resist. When parents warn, children argue. When parents restrict, children rebel. The problem is not disobedience. It is premature independence. The modern education system also plays a role. Children are often encouraged to express opinions freely, negotiate, question rules, and demand reasoning behind every instruction. While this builds critical thinking, it also reduces instinctive obedience. A child who asks a teacher, "Why do we have to do this?" will also ask a parent, "Why should I listen?" This habit of questioning is not disrespect. It is a result of the environment. But when parents expect instant obedience, the child's instinct to question becomes a source of conflict. Parents must also understand that love has changed forms. In earlier generations, love was shown through discipline, sacrifice, and guidance. Today, children interpret love through emotional availability, support, and gentle communication. A parent may believe that setting a strict boundary is an act of love, but the child may interpret it as harshness or lack of trust. Similarly, a child may crave emotional warmth, but the parent might be offering material comfort instead. This mismatch of emotional languages causes children to drift toward external influences that feel more emotionally validating. Furthermore, modern culture frequently emphasizes personal happiness, self-expression, and emotional freedom. Children consume content that promotes doing whatever makes them happy, prioritizing their feelings and rejecting anything that feels restrictive. This message, while empowering in some ways, becomes harmful when taken to extremes. Obedience sometimes requires sacrificing immediate comfort for long-term benefit. But children raised in a culture of instant gratification struggle with long-term thinking. They want what feels good now. When parents encourage discipline, children resist because discipline feels like discomfort. There is also the emotional reality of failed parental promises. Many children feel that their parents do not keep their word promising time but being too busy, promising outings but canceling due to work, promising attention but being distracted by phones or stress. These broken moments accumulate. Children begin to lose trust in parental authority. They start to believe that adults say things they do not mean. As trust erodes, obedience weakens. Trust and obedience are deeply connected. When trust breaks, obedience follows. Another modern influence is the parents' fear of losing their child's love. Many parents hesitate to enforce boundaries because they fear upsetting their children. They confuse authority with harshness and avoid discipline entirely. But children need firmness as much as they need kindness. When parents avoid discipline, children test limits. When limits are unclear, children push boundaries further. Eventually, disobedience becomes normal because there are no consequences. Parents then become frustrated and react emotionally, causing children to resist even more. Consistency is key, but consistency requires courage. In some homes, parents use anger instead of explanation. They shout instead of guide. They punish instead of teach. They demand obedience without building understanding. Children raised in such environments obey out of fear temporarily but rebel emotionally in the long run. Fear-based obedience does not last. It creates resentment. It creates secret defiance. It creates emotional distance. Children may follow orders on the surface but disconnect internally. True obedience comes from respect, not fear. Another powerful factor is that children today have more rights, more awareness, and more legal protections than before. They know they cannot be punished harshly. They know they can refuse certain things. This awareness, although important for protecting children, sometimes leads to misuse. Children may mistake freedom for authority. They may believe they hold equal power to parents. When children begin to see themselves as equals, Obedience shifts from natural to optional. But despite all these challenges, the core reason children struggle to obey today is emotional overstimulation. Their brains are constantly active: videos, games, messages, alerts, notifications, homework, social pressure, and entertainment. They rarely experience stillness. A child who lives in a constant state of stimulation cannot easily transition into calm listening or disciplined behavior. Their mind becomes restless. Their patience shortens. Their frustration rises quickly. Disobedience becomes a natural reaction, not a conscious choice. Children also crave autonomy. They want to feel capable, trusted, and respected. When parents give orders without giving choices, children feel powerless. Powerlessness leads to resistance. But when parents involve them in decisions, small or big, children feel valued and cooperation increases. Obedience grows when children feel ownership. Children of this century also grow up with parents who are emotionally exhausted. The modern world demands so much: work stress, financial pressure, social expectations, mental fatigue. Parents come home drained, carrying emotions they cannot process. When they see disobedience, they react not from calmness but from accumulated stress. Children sense this emotional tension and mirror it. A stressed parent cannot cultivate a peaceful child. A nervous home cannot produce obedient behavior. And yet, even in this complicated century, children still need exactly what children have always needed: unconditional love, emotional connection, guidance, consistent boundaries, and understanding. They may resist at times, but deep inside, they still want to belong. They still want to be accepted. They still want parental approval. The modern world may confuse them, but it has not erased their human need for love. Parents must remember that obedience is not the ultimate goal. The goal is raising emotionally stable, responsible, respectful, and compassionate human beings. Obedience is only one part of that. Instead of asking, "Why doesn't my child obey?" parents can begin asking, "What is my child feeling? What is my child struggling with? What is my child trying to express through this behavior?" When parents shift from control to understanding, from punishment to guidance, from shouting to listening, obedience naturally grows. The world has changed, but the heart of a child has not. Children still bloom in the warmth of affection. They still respond to kindness. They still soften when they feel safe. They still follow when they feel loved. The key is reconnecting, rebuilding trust, and meeting them where they are, not where the world expects them to be. Modern children also live in a world where their identity is constantly shaped, reshaped, and challenged by external forces. They are exposed to thousands of ideas, everyday ideas, about who they should be, how they should speak, how they should dress, and how they should behave. In this constant identity struggle, the home feels like a place that tries to limit them, while the world outside seems to offer endless freedom. A child who feels restricted at home and liberated outside naturally chooses the environment that aligns with their emotional needs. But what parents must understand is that the freedom children chase is often superficial. It is not the freedom of safety, belonging, or emotional grounding. It is the freedom of impulse, noise, and temporary excitement. When parents try to protect children from harmful influences, children interpret it as interference. This emotional misunderstanding creates defiance. Another major factor is the normalization of disrespect in modern interactions. Sarcasm has become humor. Rudeness has become confidence. Talking back is considered being smart. Children see these behaviors everywhere in shows, memes, videos, and peer conversations. When disrespect becomes funny, obedience becomes boring. When disobedience becomes entertainment, respect becomes outdated. Children start imitating what they see because children learn from repetition. A repeated behavior becomes a learned behavior. And when disrespect is repeated everywhere, it becomes normalized. It is also important to understand that many modern parents unknowingly contribute to disobedience by rewarding negative behavior. When a child refuses to eat, parents offer something tastier. When a child throws a tantrum, parents give in to avoid conflict. When a child argues, parents try to negotiate. When a child demands something expensive, parents feel guilty and buy it. These actions, though done out of love, teach children that misbehavior brings rewards. Children learn quickly, and if misbehavior becomes a tool to get what they want, obedience naturally decreases. Another subtle but powerful reason for the decline in obedience is the lack of meaningful role models. In the past, children grew up around extended families, grandparents, uncles, aunts, neighbors, who collectively reinforced values of respect and discipline. Today many families live isolated lives. Children may have fewer positive adult figures to look up to. Instead, they look up to celebrities or online personalities who may not represent healthy values. When role models shift from wise elders to trendy influencers, children learn behaviors centered around attention, not character. Then comes the emotional reality that children today are often overstressed without having emotional guidance. They are expected to manage school, homework, tests, friendships, social pressure, and sometimes even household responsibilities. They carry emotional burdens silently. When parents give instructions without acknowledging their struggles, children feel misunderstood and resist. Disobedience is often a cry for emotional attention. A child who feels seen and supported cooperates more willingly. A child who feels overwhelmed and unheard becomes resistant. There is also a rise in child-centered parenting, where parents revolve their lives around the child's comfort. While affection is essential, constant pampering creates entitlement. Entitled children do not obey because they are not accustomed to hearing the word no. They believe their needs must come first in every situation. When they encounter boundaries, they interpret them as unfair. The problem is not the child. The problem is the environment that conditioned them into believing they deserve special treatment without responsibility. Additionally, many parents today unknowingly create dependency rather than resilience. They solve every problem for their children, speak on their behalf, protect them from consequences, and ensure their comfort. Children raised in such environments struggle with frustration. They do not develop patience. They cannot tolerate discomfort. When asked to do something difficult or inconvenient, they resist. Obedience requires resilience, the ability to handle discomfort, effort, and responsibility. Without resilience, disobedience becomes natural, because it is easier than effort. However, children are not solely to blame. Many modern parents lack the time, energy, or emotional tools to build the foundation of respect. Parents are overstressed, overworked, and emotionally drained. They want the best for their children but are exhausted by life's demands. When parents do not have time to connect emotionally, they rely on commands instead of conversations. But commands do not create obedience. Connection does. Children who feel emotionally disconnected are more likely to rebel. Another hidden reason is the shift in family culture from collective to individualistic. In earlier generations, the family functioned as a unit. Decisions were made collectively. Values were shared. Everyone contributed. Children learned responsibility early. Today, individualism is celebrated. Everyone in the family has separate routines, separate screens, separate rooms, separate interests. The sense of togetherness that once reinforced obedience has faded. When children do not feel part of a collective, they do not feel the need to obey collective rules. Parents also make the mistake of comparing their children to others. This creates insecurity and resentment. Children who feel constantly compared become defensive and rebellious. They begin to see parents as critics, not supporters. Obedience becomes difficult when the relationship turns into a competition instead of a connection. When children feel judged, they resist. When they feel valued, they listen. It is also important to recognize that children today often lack coping mechanisms. They do not know how to deal with disappointment, frustration, boredom, or failure. They turn to screens for emotional escape instead of facing their emotions. Parents must teach coping not by protecting children from hardship, but by helping them navigate through it. A child who learns to manage emotions becomes calmer, more grounded, and naturally more obedient. Another major reason for declining obedience is the inconsistency in parenting. Some days parents are strict, other days lenient. Some rules are enforced, others ignored. Children become confused. Confusion leads to testing boundaries. Testing boundaries leads to disobedience. Children need predictability. Predictability creates security. Security creates cooperation. Inconsistent discipline creates uncertainty, which leads to resistance. Modern parents are also more afraid of confrontation. They avoid conflicts because they feel guilty or overwhelmed. But children need firm boundaries. Boundaries teach self-control, respect, and responsibility. When boundaries are missing, children interpret freedom as authority, and obedience becomes optional. Despite all these challenges, it is essential to understand that children today are not intentionally disobedient. They are emotionally overwhelmed, mentally overstimulated, socially influenced, and spiritually disconnected. They need guidance more than ever before. They need emotional grounding. They need time, affection, attention, and understanding. Parents must shift from asking, "Why doesn't my child obey?" to "What has changed in my child's world that makes obedience difficult?" When parents approach their children with curiosity instead of judgment, with compassion instead of anger, with patience instead of frustration, obedience becomes a natural outcome of a healthy relationship. The solution begins with emotional connection. A child who feels loved listens. A child who feels safe cooperates. A child who feels respected respects in return. Obedience is not something parents force, it is something children offer when they feel emotionally secure. And as we continue exploring this difficult question, why children of this century do not obey their parents the way children once did, we must also look deeper into the invisible battles being fought inside every young mind. Because behind every act of disobedience, behind every argument, behind every slammed door, there is always a story, a reason, a struggle, a pressure that the child himself may not fully understand. Today's generation is not simply refusing to obey. They are trying to survive in an emotional climate that is harsher, faster, and more uncertain than anything the previous generations ever faced. And yet, parents often misinterpret this survival struggle as rudeness, rebellion, or rejection. Many children today grow up with silent storms inside them. They are overwhelmed with choices, but empty inside. They have access to knowledge, but lack wisdom. They communicate constantly, but understand very little. Their feelings run deep, but their guidance runs thin. And when a child is emotionally confused, even the simplest instruction from a parent can feel like pressure. Even a small correction can feel like criticism. Even a gentle reminder can feel like a burden. It is not that the child does not want to obey. It is that the child no longer knows how to respond to a world that expects too much and understands too little. In earlier generations, children obeyed because they feared consequences, but they also respected the hierarchy of the home. They grew up seeing their parents struggle, sacrifice, and serve the family. Today's children do not always see their parents' sacrifices. They only see their stress. They do not always see the pain their parents hide. They only see the arguments that surface. And slowly, very quietly, the emotional connection weakens. When connection weakens, obedience becomes impossible. Because obedience was never just about discipline, it was about trust, love, and belonging. Many parents work long hours, not because they want to be away from home, but because they want to provide a better life. But to a child, absence feels like distance, and distance feels like disconnection. And when a child feels disconnected, he begins to form his own world, his own views, his own rules. This new world is shaped not by the wisdom of elders, but by screens, celebrities, influencers, trends, and the false confidence of virtual validation. So when parents try to step in, the child resists not because he hates his parents, but because he has already built a universe where the parents no longer have authority. Yet, deep down, every child still needs guidance, direction, and boundaries. They crave structure even while they break it. They crave love even when they act as if they don't need anyone. The truth is, children do not obey today because the world has taught them independence without responsibility, expression without discipline, exposure without protection. And in this imbalance, children feel powerful in moments, but lost in life. Parents too feel helpless. They fear correcting their children because they worry it will push them further away. They fear saying no, because society may judge them as strict or old-fashioned. They fear enforcing rules because modern advice constantly tells them to avoid conflict, be soft, be friendly, be flexible. But children do not need parents to be their friends. They need parents to be their anchors. They need emotional safety more than emotional softness. They need clarity more than comfort. They need guidance more than approval. Still, the emotional distance keeps widening, and with it, obedience weakens further. The child begins to see the parent not as a leader, but as a disturbance. Every instruction becomes an argument. Every reminder becomes a complaint. Every rule becomes a restriction. And slowly, quietly, the home turns into a battlefield where both sides feel misunderstood. But here lies the painful truth. Children today do not obey because they no longer feel that their parents fully understand the world they live in. They think the parents' advice belongs to another time, another century, another lifestyle. They believe that their parents' concerns are outdated, their warnings exaggerated, and their expectations unnecessary. and so they resist not to hurt but to protect their own worldview. Yet beneath the surface, they are still children, frightened, confused, insecure, craving guidance but afraid to admit it. They hide their vulnerability behind attitude, their fear behind stubbornness, their pain behind disrespect. What appears as disobedience is often a reflection of internal chaos. And so the question is not simply why children do not obey. The deeper question is, who is guiding them emotionally? Who is helping them understand themselves? Who is filling the empty spaces left by silence, busyness, stress, and distance? Because if those spaces are not filled by parents, they will be filled by someone or something else. As we go further into this truth, we begin to realize that disobedience is not born in a single moment. It is shaped slowly, quietly, over years, through patterns, through behaviors, through communication gaps, through emotional walls that rise silently between parents and children. It begins with small misunderstandings that no one clarifies, small hurts that no one heals, small distances that no one notices. And one day, the child who once ran into the arms of the parent now walks away with impatience, irritation, or defiance. It feels sudden, but it never is. Children of today are growing up in houses filled with noise but lacking conversation. Parents ask about homework, grades, chores, but rarely about fears, dreams, or emotional struggles. Children talk endlessly about trends, games, and friends, but rarely about loneliness, confusion, or self-doubt. And when communication becomes shallow, obedience becomes meaningless. Because obedience is not about commands. It is about connection. It flows naturally when a child feels understood. It disappears when the child feels unseen. A child who feels emotionally safe will listen even to difficult instructions. A child who feels emotionally ignored will rebel even against simple requests. This is the silent equation of human relationships. It was true 1,000 years ago. And it is true today. The difference is that past generations had fewer distractions, fewer pressures, and fewer emotional barriers. Today's children are bombarded with influences every waking hour, and the parents' voices often get drowned in this noise. We often compare the past to the present and think today's children have changed. But the truth is, the world has changed faster than their hearts can adapt. We often compare the past to the present and think today's children have changed. But the truth is, the world has changed faster than their hearts can adapt. What they need is not stricter punishment or louder voices. They need parents who see beyond their mistakes, who understand the hidden battles they fight, who stand beside them not as judges but as protectors, mentors, and guiding lights. Obedience does not grow from fear, it grows from a bond. It grows when a child feels safe enough to listen, when a child trusts enough to follow, when a child knows that even in their failures, their parents remain their shelter. The greatest gift a parent can give in this century is not control, it is connection. Not authority, it is presence. Not perfection, it is patience. So let us raise children who listen not because they fear punishment, but because they feel understood. Let us raise children who respect not because they are forced to, but because they see respect all around them. Let us raise children who obey not out of pressure, but out of love, trust, and the warmth of a relationship that no digital world can replace. And maybe, just maybe, when parents begin to walk toward their children with empathy and children begin to walk toward their parents with honesty, the distance of this generation will shrink, the noise will fade, the arguments will soften. And in that gentle space between two hearts, obedience will return not as a command, but as a natural expression of love. Because in every century, in every era, in every home, one truth remains unchanging. Children do not flourish through rules alone, they flourish through relationships. Children do not grow through perfection, they grow through understanding. And children do not obey because they must, they obey because they feel loved. This is the path forward. This is the lesson. This is the hope. Subscribe for more deep dive videos on humanity. Thanks for watching.